Be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach, we're going to be starting maseches shkalim. Just want to mention before we start the akdama to maseches shkalim that Mitzvah Hashem will be going through Shishis Mishnah over here, trying to explain it pretty simply in an understandable way. Part of the reason of this is because one way to get pretty fluent in Torah, the basis of Torah Shabbal Pez Mishnayos. So you start from there with the Rav and you learn it well. There's a good chance that you'll be very familiar with a lot of the information and a lot of the sugyas that you have when you're learning Gemara. Now, in yeshivas, they don't focus much on Mishnayos, they focus more on the lumdus of Gemara. But in a certain if at a younger age, they would be more focused on Mishnayos, to have a fluency in Mishnayos. And when you start Gemara, you'll know a lot more, you'll have much more of a background, and it'll make a lot more sense. And also I want to mention that in order to, if everyone who's listening could do a small favor to share this shiur with their friends and family, post it on the WhatsApps, or just send it around and tell people about it if you enjoy it, tell people about it if you don't enjoy it, you'll also get a chelik in the Arbatas Torah. It's possible to support this podcast as well. It should be on the page to be able to, you'll see where it says it, if the Olam doesn't mind to donate a little bit for the shkalim. Alright, so let's take a look at the akdama to maseches shkalim, what we're talking about over here. The ikar topic of maseches shkalim is the maseches hashekel, which was a tax that each yid was required to pay every year when the Beis Hamikdash stood to fund the karbanos tzibur that were brought each day, as well as for the Yomim Tevim. And this contribution was a mitzvah midoraisa. So there's a couple of stuff that we got to know. Number one, we're going to go through 4 different basic ideas over here. Number one, the mitzvah of maseches hashekel. The karbanos that were brought in the Beis Hamikdash included both karbanos yochid and karbanos tzibur. Karbanos tzibur are those that are brought on behalf of the entire Klal Yisrael. Example of these are the daily Talmids, the Talmid Shal Shachar and the Talmid Shal Bein Rabbayim, Korban Musaf on Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, and Yom Tovim. Now, the Mishnah goes through, in Parak Dalet of Shkalim, the Mishnah goes through exactly where the money went. And for a basic introduction to the halachas of what karbanos are what, we already spoke about this in the Hakdama to Parak Hey in Masechet Pesachim. Since these are karbanos tzibur, they must be paid for by the tzibur. They're not funded by donations. Rather, the Torah requires every single yid to have an equal share in them. There's no such thing as somebody giving more. There's no such thing as somebody giving less. Now, avada. There was makom to give more money to the Beis Hamikdash. That would be a separate nadava. It would not be the mitzvah of maseches hashekel. To this end, the Torah commands that each man contribute a fixed amount, a half a shekel once a year, to a special fund in the Beis Hamikdash known as the lishka, which literally means a chamber. Lishka rhymes with pishka, from which money would be taken to buy the animals and other items used in the karbanos. The mitzvah to give a maseches hashekel is learned in the beginning of Parshas Kisisa. This is Parshas Shkalim, what we learn in the Dalet Parshas from before Purim till Pesach. And the Psukim read as it's Parag Lamed, Pasuk Yud Aleph through Tezayin in Sefer Shmos. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying the following: Kisisas Reish B'nai Yisrael. When you take a census of B'nai Yisrael, Lifkudeihem, according to their numbers, meaning when you want to count, it's a different way of saying when you want to count Eden, but we know we're not supposed to count Eden, as we know. Every man shall give Hashem an atonement for his soul when counting them, so that there won't be a plague among them when counting them. So this is where it comes from, that if you would count them, then there would be a plague. So you have to count tokens that they would give, and this was also used as a donation, as we explained in our shir on Parshas Kisisa, which you can always go back and look at that and listen to that one as well. A lot of times the pasuk mentions shekel over here, 4 times to be exact. It means like this: they shall give everyone who passes through the census. It's actually a question in the Gemara what it means kol ever lapkudim. A half a shekel of the shekel HaKodesh. The shekel is 20 gera, which is half a shekel as a portion to Hashem. The pasuk continues, kol ever lapkudim mi ben esrim shana b'mal, again kol ever lapkudim. Anybody who passes through the census, mi ben esrim shana b'mal, from 20 years and up, yitin trumas Hashem, should give the truma to the Beis HaMikdash for Hashem. And here's where it gets interesting, that nobody was able to give a bigger or smaller donation. Everyone had to give a fixed amount, a half a shekel. Ha'osher lo yarba, a wealthy person doesn't add any more, v'hadal lo yamit, and a poor person doesn't give any less. Mimachlis ha-shekel, from this half a shekel coin that they were giving to the Beis HaMikdash, lo says trumas Hashem l'charpal nafshei seichem, to give the portion of Hashem to atone for your l'charpal nafshei seichem. So Gaven Azam insert kapara by giving this money to the Beis HaMikdash. Just thinking it's interesting, maybe the ikar of kaparas that we do every Yom Kippur is to give the tzedakah, to give the chicken to the ani that he could eat it, to give the money to whichever cause that you're giving it to. But by giving tzedakah, we see here it's a kapara. We know that a lot of inyanei tzedakah come from this, as the Gemara Bav Basra and Davyud darshan some of the psukim here. So just kedai to know that this is talking about any sort of donation. We learn out from here. Although these psukim seem to refer only to the nedava of a half a shekel, the mitzvah, the chiyuv of machtas a shekel for the purpose of accounting, they also included a mitzvah to contribute to the funds for the Beis HaMikdash and for the Mishkan for the purchase of the karbanos tzibur. This is seen in the pasuk ha'oshel lo-yarba v'adal lo-yamit b'machtas a shekel l'chapral nafshei seichem, which is understood by the Chacham as a reference to the kaparas ha'avonos that were provided by the karbanos tzibur. Since they serve as a kapara, these karbanos serve as a kapara, all Yidden must have an equal share in them, in order for Gan Klal Yisrael to have the kapara. Every year, beginning on the first day of the month in Nisan, all communal offerings, all karbanos tzibur, must come from the new shkalim collected for that year. This is merumas in the pasuk. This is learned out in the Gemara. This is the oil of each month in its renewal for the months of the year. The Chacham understands this to mean that renew the karbanos once a year by bringing the karbanos tzibur from shkalim, which are newly collected for that year. Since Nisan is called the first month of the year, the chaydash, the chidosh of the chodshoy l'chodshay hashana, is to begin on the first day of that month. In order to make it possible to start using the donations on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the shkalim were collected in Adar, so they may be used to purchase the new karbanos beginning in Nisan. Since everyone had to contribute, many thousands of shkalim were collected. They were not all spent at once. There were 3 times a year large sums were withdrawn from the main fund to pay for the purchase of karbanos for the next part of the year, as will be discussed in Parag Gimel. Since everyone's shkalim were pooled into this fund, the withdrawn money was considered to belong to everyone, even though whose coins were not actually used, because it all went into the big fund. All Yidden are required to pay the half a shekel tax annually, whether they were Kohanim, although there is a shita, as we'll see later on in the first parak, that Kohanim are Potter, Leviim, Yisraelim, Gerim, Avodim, Shechrorim, Nashim, and Ketanim are Potter, because the pasuk says that every man is mechuyev. What does the pasuk say? Mi ben esrim shana v'mala, b'nei Yisrael, probably we darshan. The chiyuv to pay the machzor shekel falls not only on Yidden living in Eretz Yisrael, but even those living outside of Eretz Yisrael. That's why there were shluchim yotzim, and there's a big discussion in the Gemara that the people who live further out, maybe they should send the shluchim, because be'echad ba'adam mashmiin al shkalim, maybe the message, the hachraza, is not going to be heard in the far distant places from Eretz Yisrael till way after the Rosh Chodesh Adar. So then you're going to have to, maybe they should do it earlier. But the Lemaskana Sagamara, we don't change that time. In the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, when many Yidden lived outside of Eretz Yisrael, many of the shkalim donated outside of Eretz Yisrael did not reach the Beis HaMikdash by Rosh Chodesh Nisan, yet the residents of Chutz La'aretz had to have a share in the karbanos tzibur from that day forward. So to deal with this problem, the people in the Beis HaMikdash would intend for their initial withdrawal of coins from the fund to serve not only on behalf of those shkalim that were already in the lishka, but also on behalf of those whose shkalim were on the way, or even on behalf of those whose shkalim were not yet to be collected, to have a chelik in the kaparas. Klal Yisrael from the karbanos tzibur is zichar zechia shelei befonov. Nevertheless, 3 separate withdrawals were made at different times of the year to make sure that even shkalim sent from Chutz La'aretz further out could potentially be used to buy these karbanos. Although the mitzvah of maseches shekel was a chiyuv only as long as the Beis HaMikdash stood, we commemorate this mitzvah in the minhag of giving a half a shekel, which is half of the current currency unit, which in America would be $50, to tzedakah on Pesach in Adar on Purim before Kriyas HaMegillah v'yishtei din Ramah. Okay, that's where it comes from. We learn Parsha Shkalim and we give Shkalim to, it's interesting because in a certain eifin, by giving money, it's to be marbereyos, but the point of this wasn't so much to be marbereyos, it was to be able to afford the karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash, but in a sense, because you're paying that the other Yidden could have a kapara, that creates a gavaldic relationship between all the people if they know that there are other people that are supporting their kaparas avonos. All right, the second thing that we're going to discuss here is that the Mishnah and the Mefarshim in this Masechta will constantly be referencing different funds in the Beis HaMikdash. The 2 most common ones are the Lishka, which was the Trumas HaLishka, and the fund of the Bedek HaBayis. The Bedek HaBayis was to maintain and to keep up the maintenance in the Beis HaMikdash. The Lishka fund is the fund in which the Maseches shekel was collected for. It was used to pay for the Karbanos Tzibur, and as we mentioned, a portion of the coins from this fund was periodically withdrawn to buy the Karbanos. The money that was taken on these occasions was called the Trumas HaLishka. Money from this Trumas HaLishka was also used for general expenses related to the Beis HaMikdash, such as the salary of the Talmidei Chachamim who taught the Kaihanim how to do the Avodah. Amongst other things, the Gemara on Ksubis on Daf Kuvav goes through an arichos explaining where different funds in the Beis HaMikdash went to. The extra money in this fund was spent on other needs in the Beis HaMikdash. You have to remember, let's say Big Day Kahuna, right? Maybe it went for the Levium's instruments. They needed firewood to keep the Beis HaMikdash warm. They needed things for the Kohen Gadol to have and to do. And different things in the Avodah, the animals costed money, and the flour for the Mincha, as we'll see throughout the Masechta. There's another major fund in the Beis HaMikdash that's separate and distinct from the Maseches shekel, and this was the one that was used for Bedek HaBayis, which is the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. It used to pay for repairs in the Beis HaMikdash. This fund was not funded by any tax. Rather, people donated to it voluntarily, giving either money, material fit to be used in the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. Let's say they needed drills and saws and screws and nails, so you could drop off a box of screws and they would take that. Or items that could be sold by the Beis HaMikdash, by the Gizbar, by the treasurer, to pay for the repairs. And as we know, when a person is makdish something, so if a person is makdish an animal, we know that automatically goes to the Mizbeach. And if it's something that it's not possible to go on the Mizbeach, so then it would go for the Bedek HaBayis. And we'll see throughout this Masechta and throughout Seder Kachim, we'll be discussing the different types of Kedusha, different types of Hekdeshos, and how it would work. The next thing that we're going to discuss is that the shekel min HaTorah had the value of 4 dinar, so half a shekel was 2 dinar. In the Mishnah, however, the term shekel refers to a coin valued at only 2 dinars, while the 4 dinar coin is called a sela. The Ramban explains that as people became accustomed to paying the annual head tax, they began to refer to it as the payment of the shekel, and this in turn led them to call the coin that's used for the payment of shekel, even though it was actually half a shekel. He further suggests that in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, a special coin was minted for use in payment for this tax, and this coin was given the name shekel. That's probably what they're trying to call the Israeli currency based on anyways, but in those days the Zikr didn't use bills. From that point onward, the biblical shekel coin began to be called a sela. In any event, throughout the Masechta, the Mishnah and the Gemara both speak of giving a shekel rather than giving a half a shekel, since this reflected the common usage of the term in the second Beis HaMikdash, in the Tkufas Bayisheni. And the Mevarshim, and we'll speak in these terms of giving a shekel instead of a half a shekel, but we mean a half a shekel. The fifth thing is, the second half of this Masechta discusses the administrative structure of the Beis HaMikdash and the system for paying for the many private karbonos brought each day in the Beis HaMikdash, and the halachas for dealing with money found in the Beis HaMikdash as well as in Yerushalayim, and other aspects of the avodah and function in the Beis HaMikdash. Logically, This subject matter should seem to belong in Seder Kachim, which discusses the procedures of the avodas in the Beis Hamikdash. However, since the maseches shekel was collected at a fixed time each year, so as to conform with the requirement to renew the Beis Hamikdash annually, its halachas were arranged in Seder Moed, which deals with the commandments that are linked to the calendar. Another connection between shkalim and the Yom Tovim is that the half shekel tax was funded that was funding the karbanos that were brought on every yontif. So in order to have the karbanos every yontif, you had to have the maseches shekel. Since the time allotted for giving the shekel, which was throughout the entire month of Adar, closely precedes the yontif of Pesach, this masechta was placed close to masechta Pesachim. Shkalim is unique amongst the masechtas in Seder Moed that it doesn't have any Gemara in the Bavli. For this reason, the Yerushalmi has become accepted as the standard Gemara for this masechta. For many centuries, shkalim had been linked to Talmud Bavli, and the study of Bavli is considered incomplete unless it includes this masechta. Now, there will be people that will tell you that, even those that learned Daf Yomi, they will say, no, shkalim is Yerushalmi. When we do Yerushalmi Daf Yomi, then we'll learn shkalim. But when we're not learning that, we won't do that. And there's no Beis Hamikdash in which we can bring the karbanos tzibur that bring us so much kapara. Says, since there's no reason to give a maseches shekel today, we look forward to the time when Hashem, in Berev Rachamov, Rachamecha Harabim, will Hashev Shchinoscha L'Tzion Yirecha, and will restore the Beis Hamikdash to us, that we may bring again the karbanos and contribute our maseches shekel, so everyone can have l'chapra l'nafesh yiseinu. Mehera v'yameinu amen.